Good time of day, guys! My name is Godzi, and welcome back to another episode of Higurashi When They Cry, Ch.3 Tatarigoroshi. Last episode, Keiichi continued planning how he's going to kill Satoko's uncle, and he realized, everything I'm doing here is kinda just a smarter version of what Satoshi did a year ago, isn't it? That's interesting and not at all worrisome considering he disappeared. Yep, I'm just gonna keep on doing this. The absolute dumbass. Anyways, before we get into this episode, I've got some things to talk about regarding the anime. Just not too much, again. We haven't really had a long discussion since the end of, what was it? Watanagashi. Yeah. I couldn't remember what the name of the arc was for some reason. But, yeah, we're going into spoiler time for the anime, so mute now if you don't want spoilers, because if you don't, you'll probably regret it. Let's go. So, first things first, we've got a comment from last episode, which is what I'm basing most of what I'm going to talk about on, so we're going to read it. This comment is from Dapper Shinks, and reads as follows. There was a difference in how Satoko reacted to Keiichi's hand at the end of this episode. Originally, Keiichi put his hand on Satoko and it sat there for a bit, while Satoko reacted with a slow build-up, treating Keiichi more violently than she did in Go. This time, there are actually a few frames where she looks towards Keiichi's hand and then slaps it before it even touches her. Perhaps she knew it was coming. Does this mean she faked her outburst? Possibly, but I think it's a mixture. Following the Sata conspiracy, that is a name for it that I really like. She had to act as though she isn't in a time loop, but also getting abused fucking sucks, even if you are looping, so... Yeah, I didn't voice this that I wanted to say, either 1 or 2 episodes ago when the last episode came out, but... I think it was the last episode, wasn't it? Because this should be going up on Saturday, so... No, this should be going up on Sunday, I'm an idiot. So yeah, it was last episode that I last talked about, the anime. I didn't say this last episode because I didn't know if it was true, and it feels insensitive. But regarding Satoko's outburst, it did feel a bit more faked, but at the same time, it felt real still. I don't know, really. Because it's like, she still threw up and everything, but it's like, maybe she planned that. But it's just, I don't know. I don't know what to think, really. Because it's like, the few frames where she looks at Keiichi's hand and slaps it away before having her outburst does make it seem like Satoko's just like, alright, this is happening, so time to do my outburst, so Rika thinks that I'm, not frickin' crazy or something. I don't fucking know what's going on, between her and Rika, really, but, it could be any number of things so far. Anyways, I think part of what it was definitely the fact that her voice didn't sound as genuine, if that makes sense. Granted, I don't remember what she sounded like in the original anime, nor do I know what she sounded like in the visual novel because I don't have the voices on. But it just didn't seem as feral, emotional, and I don't know, like, in the visual novel, it seemed more like she was just absolutely losing it. Like, in every sense she was losing it. While in Go, it seemed more like, you know? Like, yeah, she still threw up and she was crying, holding her head and scratching at it. And, yeah, she looked terrified, she sounded terrified, but it didn't punch as hard as it did here, if that makes sense. I think part of the reason is because, unlike in Tatarigoroshi, Tatarigoroshi hasn't had any, like, big arguments between the club members, so it didn't seem like it was as tense. Because in Tatarigoroshi, it's like Satoko has her outburst, and, like, Rena's also screaming, Keiichi's also screaming, Mion is crying, I don't know what Rika's doing, but Yeah, but in Tatarigoroshi, Satsuko has her outburst, and Keiichi, Rena, and Mion are just like, well, this is something that's happening now. And then the second thing that made me think this is Rika. Because if I remember correctly, there was a part where Rika was just watching the outburst, and you couldn't see her expression. Like, it was blacked out. Which, I didn't remember that until after I had already recorded last episode, but I was like, oh god, that could be something, couldn't it? So, what I have to say about that is, I think, well, actually, I'll explain this when I read the rest of the comment. Anyways, let's continue, the comment, because there's kind of like two things that I want to say about what could be happening in Tatarigoroshi. So, to continue the comment, nope, Shion did not join in on the promise in Tatarigoroshi. Something to note about Tatarigoroshi is that it's also pulling elements from Minagoroshi, the answer arc to this question arc. I kind of completely forgot that some of the answer arcs are like kind of responses in a way to the question arcs. So that's something. Like, I think Miyakashi is to Watanagashi, Sumi Horiboshi's probably to Onikakushi. I didn't know that Minagoroshi mirrored Tatarigoroshi at all, because Minagoroshi is probably the one where I forgot basically everything except what happened at the end, and I remember nothing from Himatsubushi, so, yeah. Chie visiting Teppei was from Minagoroshi, for example. To expand on this, I need to go into anime spoilers for Minagoroshi, so, mute now if you don't want spoilers from, Minagoroshi, which is the 7th arc, I believe. Shion remembers her promise and joins the club in this arc, and flips her shit at the analogous moment to when Keiichi did, even mirroring his 1500 seconds line, though she was stopped and calmed down. It's very likely this is the direction Tatarigoroshi is going in, and we might actually get Shion's backstory here, funnily enough. I agree with a lot of that. So, I have somewhat of a theory of what I think is going to be happening through Tatarigoroshi. I feel like something massive regarding the overall story has to happen here. Assuming that Go is just going to be these 24 episodes, we're coming up on the midpoint. Like, 10 episodes have aired. Assuming Tatarigoroshi is 4 episodes, I think something big's going to have to happen in episode 12. Which should be the 17th. Is when it should be airing, and then it's probably going to take a gap on the 24th, and then the 4th arc, or however they decide to continue it, is going to start on the 31st. Regardless, I think there's going to kind of be two sides to what's going on in Tatarigoroshi. I think that the main tragedy is going to be more of, like, Keiichi and Shion are both going to try to kill Teppei. It might result in something worse. Maybe Hinamizawa syndrome will affect both of them and they'll end up attacking each other. Maybe. That could happen. I don't specifically know how that's going to happen because Hinamizawa syndrome can be unpredictable. I would have never expected Mion would be the most calm of the main group when afflicted by it. But she ended up being the most calm, assuming that is indeed, well, no, that had to be Mion, like, 100%, right? So, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Not my point either. Hinamizawa syndrome seems to affect everyone differently in different circumstances. I think we can only really point specifically so far, to Keiichi regarding that. Because I'm pretty sure, well, obviously he had it in Onikakushi. I think it's probably fair to say that he has it here in Tatarigoroshi, but his attitude in both are entirely different. In Onikakushi, he thinks everyone's out to get him, so he's a lot more chaotic and terrified in more of a cornered possum type sense, I suppose. While in Tatarigoroshi, like I said last episode, he sounds like Takuji from Wonderful Everyday. He's a lot more cold and calculating, kind of arrogant, and more or less an asshole. Like, Shion is just fucking off-the-wall wackadoo, Rena is just malicious, and Mion is even more calculating, it seems, and calm and rational, more caring, kinda. Like, when Mion has Hinamizawa syndrome, it feels like she's a mother-type figure, if that makes sense. Because it's like, assuming that she wasn't going to go back and kill Keiichi, she puts Keiichi in that cage, and she's just like, you're gonna be here, you're gonna be safe, Mommy's gonna go shoot some motherfuckers, I'll be back, dinner's in the microwave, or something like that. I don't fucking know. But, Keiichi is fucking all over the place. Granted, we've only really seen Mion, Shion, and Rena have Hinamizawa syndrome once, to my knowledge. The console arcs could have multiple other instances. I would assume not with Mion, at least. Maybe Shion and Rena had another one. Maybe even Keiichi did. But depending on the circumstances, characters react differently with Hinamizawa syndrome. Naturally. I don't fully remember how Satoko is. I think she's kind of like Keiichi in that she's like a cornered possum, in Onikakushi at least. But I can't really fully remember. I would imagine it doesn't really relate to Go anyways, especially if she's in the time loop. If she's in the time loop, doesn't fucking matter. I wouldn't assume Hinamizawa syndrome can affect her. Maybe it can, maybe it can't, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it can affect Rika, but I think that's more because she's like the queen bee of it, or something? I don't fucking know. Something to do with Takano's whole plan with murdering her in particular. But, hello dog, she's barking at nothing. Probably my dad, but he's nothing, so doesn't matter. So I think that, and I don't think we've ever really seen any instances where two characters have Hinamizawa syndrome and are kind of facing off with each other, other than in Onitamashi with Rena and Keiichi. So I think what's going to happen then in that sense is, I'm pretty sure Shion also had Hinamizawa syndrome in Watanagashi. This is kind of something I theorized back before Watanagashi really got going. Probably like halfway through Watanagashi, maybe even just episode 1 of Watanagashi. But I was just like, okay, Onitamashi was Keiichi versus Rena. I think Watanagashi is going to be Mion versus Shion. Tatari Damashi, which we didn't know would fully be a thing yet, but I assumed it probably would be, and it ends up, yes, real. That's the tougher one. Because it's like, between Onikakushi versus Sumi Horoboshi, we've got that dichotomy. Watanagashi versus Mayakashi, we've got that dichotomy. Tatarigoroshi versus Minagoroshi, what the fuck? Like, it's a bit harder to understand, because Minagoroshi is more like the penultimate arc, despite also being the answer arc for Tatarigoroshi. Because I don't think any of the main club members really have Hinamizawa syndrome in that arc, and if they do, it's not for long, assuming that it's something that can be recovered from at early stages, just at the drop of a hat, maybe, and then come back in full force. Like, maybe that's what happened in Onitamashi. Like, after Keiichi talked to Rika, he's just like, yeah, maybe it's all just in my head. And so he gives Rena the benefit of the doubt, but then it comes back when she starts attacking him. But then, what I think could happen in Tatari Damashi at this point, then, is that it could be Keiichi sort of versus Shion, but I don't think it'd be them actively working against each other. Granted, Rena versus Keiichi wasn't really them actively working against each other. It was more like Keiichi was scared for a little bit, got over it, and Rena still tried to kill him. Then we don't really know what happened in Watanagashi because most of the murders were off-screen. In fact, wasn't every murder off-screen? Yeah, every murder in Watanagashi was off-screen, wasn't it? Yeah. Tatari Damashi, I think what will probably happen is Keiichi and Shion will both try to kill Teppei. Maybe they'll work together and get away with it, even, like, actually for real this time, because I'm pretty sure Keiichi just doesn't get away with it in Tatarigoroshi, and assumedly Shion doesn't kill Teppei in Minagoroshi. Judging from that comment, I don't really remember much of what happened in Minagoroshi, though, other than Takano murdering everyone, so, yeah. Anyways, that's one possibility, that they work together, fully get away with it, and that's the extent of the tragedy, maybe. Or their delusions overtake their minds, and they assume, I need to protect Satoko, you want to protect Satoko more, so I'm going to kill you to protect Satoko, because there's no way you can protect her better than me. Keiichi and Shion both say that to each other. Alternatively, they delude each other to be Teppei. Possibly. And they kill each other. Maybe. Don't know. Either way, I think it's gonna have to somehow be Keiichi and Shion. But I feel like in order for that to 100% be the case, next episode we'd have to get more of Shion. Because it's like, in Tatarigoroshi, we haven't gotten that much of Shion. Like, ever since the barbecue party, she's just kind of not existed. So, yeah. Granted, I don't think that's fully true, because there was the phone call last episode, where Keiichi called Mion. I'm pretty sure that was Shion. Like, I think doubtlessly it was Shion that he called, not Mion. But, yeah. So that could happen. That would be the main tragedy of the actual arc. But I think what's actually going to happen in the background is, assuming Teppei gets killed, regardless, Keiichi and Shion's fates don't really matter in this instance. Teppei gets killed, somehow. Satoko goes back to Rika's house. I think Rika's suspicious of Satoko. And since by then, ideally, it would have been more than a day since Satoko's outburst in the classroom, she's going to be like, Satoko, yada yada yada, she's gonna confront her, and she's just like, if I'm wrong, it doesn't fucking matter. I did this to Keiichi last time, so I'm gonna do it to Satoko this time. If I'm wrong, doesn't matter, I'll die. Somehow, because I died last time, don't know by who. So, yeah. I think Rika's gonna confront Satoko, she'll be correct, Satoko will further confront her, and we're going to see the whole veil come off. As for how it's going to continue from there, I don't know. But I think that's probably what's going to happen here in Tatari Damashi. Teppei's going to die somehow, either by Keiichi and Shion working together, or they're going to work against each other and Teppei's just going to die in the crossfire. Satoko goes back to Rika. Rika confronts her. Satoko's like, how much do you know? Yada yada yada. Featherin'. I don't know. It's still very weird, but I'm pretty convinced at this point Satoko's gotta somehow be in on the time loop. Whether she's working against Rika, in that she's actively sabotaging her, or she's working against Rika in that she's a competitor. It doesn't really matter right now. We'll find out more as the arc continues. Yeah, let's get back into this. Hello guys, welcome back. Sunday, that is the day this episode goes up, congrats. The fireworks I heard before noon were probably to announce the opening of the festival. Too bad this episode's going up after noon. And the weather certainly wasn't festival weather. It was cloudy. The television forecast was calling for possible downpours starting this evening and lasting until around midnight. But as long as it wasn't raining at the moment, the festival would go on. The festival had to open, or it wouldn't begin. I had to remember where we were specifically. The Furude Shrine grounds were probably decorated beautifully for the big performance that only happened once a year. Many paper lanterns were hung up, all in the auspicious colors of red and white. The sound of electric motors at the stalls. The voices of kids running around. Their happy families watching them, smiling. Today was the festival of Watanagashi. Was everyone already partaking in the festivities? What about Satoko? Had she forgotten her days of suffering just for a few moments, while smiling that brilliant smile she hadn't in so long? This would probably be the longest day of my life. It would be a day I would remember vividly for as long as I lived. I told my parents I'd go to the festival this evening and lounged about during the early afternoon. We may have lived under the same roof, but they couldn't help being surprised by the deviation from how I usually spent my time. Glancing at my parents out of the corner of my eye, I went to the front door. I tied my shoes just a little tighter than normal, as if to express the firmness of my resolve in those knots. When I decided to murder Satoko's uncle, I was in such a state of excitement I almost went crazy. And when I was planning out the act of a murder, which went directly against all the morals fostered in me thus far, I was in such a state of calm I almost thought I had lost my emotions. And then, yesterday, when I learned Satoshi had made exactly the same phone call as me, I didn't know how to describe the muddled feelings I had then. And now, entering today, Right now, I lacked all the emotions I'd possessed until now. To make a simple analogy, it was the kind of feeling you might get right after you wake up, when you're still half asleep and you don't feel anything very clearly. I had no anger towards that man for the violence he'd committed against Satoko, nor did I feel sadness towards or sympathize with her. I felt no discontent towards my friends, who had just waited and watched, never reaching out to her with any help, and no nervousness or fear towards the day that had finally come. Yes, right now, you could say I was in the best possible condition for carrying out a murder. When it came down to it, I would probably need to let my violent emotions take control. But right up until that moment, I would be like an insect. I would slowly, surely, and silently move towards my one objective, and then, when I had my prey, I'd attack like a bullet. There was no emotion in that, just the creeping mindset insects possessed. That sort of sneaking feeling was just the best. I would kill Satoko's uncle like he was a worm. I had to laugh a little at thinking that way, thinking like an insect. Tug. I tightened my laces one more time and walked out the door. I brought the shovel out of the front storeroom. I would need it to dig the man's grave. The shovel was a convenient one made for camping. If I twisted it like so and split it into 3, I could easily hide it in my bag. I twisted the shovel and dismantled it. And even though I'd done it countless times before, I had trouble for some reason. Like I was suddenly clumsy now. And I knew why. It wasn't because I was nervous. My weak-willed self, deep within me, was hesitant. I knew that the act of dismantling the shovel was the first step I'd take to becoming a murderer. The last twist was conspicuously difficult, but it finally submitted before the strength of my determination. The area around Satoko's house was outside my circle of activity, but even just riding my bike in the middle of the day like this might seem suspicious to an observant person. I definitely want to avoid meeting and talking to someone I knew. With that in mind, I chose the route to my destination carefully. I didn't mind going the long way around. With how long this day would be, I could never be too careful after all. Still, I was fortunate enough not to run across anybody on my way to the planned site of the crime. I wasn't superstitious at this point, but it was a good omen. The place I would dig the hole was in this grove, a little further into the woods. I was worried I might not make it to the same place as before, since there were no signs to guide me, but I arrived there smoothly and as expected. I took another look around. Not even a hint of human presence. The air was a little bit damp, but it was comfortable in the cool shade of the trees. I took the disassembled shovel out of my bag and began skillfully putting it together. Then, I stuck the tip of the shovel into a soft-looking patch of ground and pushed on it with my foot. The shovel would split into the earth if I put some strength into that foot. The act of doing so seemed awfully like the point of no return, and it made me hesitate. I was just digging a hole with a shovel, but it made me gulp hard. Calm down, Keiichi Mayabara. Let's do a countdown. Get it done on the count of 3, okay? Alright. 1, 2... I couldn't do it on the countdown, despite it just being sticking the shovel into the ground, and I had to count down 5 or 6 times. Damn it, I'm just digging a hole. This is pathetic! As I thought that, I put strength into my heel like I was stepping on something unpleasant, and split came the sharp noise. It was only soft at the beginning. Roots and stones quickly got in my way, informing me just how hard it was to dig a hole big enough for a person. No decent person would ever come here anyway. Maybe it would be enough to cover him up with some dirt. Every time a naive thought like that crept into my mind, I bit down on it with my teeth and dug even harder. I've dug enough now. I could hide him like this. Every time I thought that, I would go down into the hole, grow disappointed at how shallow it was, and return to digging. The thin layer of sweat on my brow eventually formed into drops and fell to the ground. My back was in even worse shape, I would imagine. My damp shirt adhered to my skin, and it felt so disgusting. The things I couldn't stand the most were the mosquitoes, I could imagine. Maybe they were attracted by the scent of my sweat, The white and black striped mosquitoes would cling to me whenever I let my guard down. It was hot. It was disgusting. I was sticky. I was itchy. All those uncomfortable feelings surged through me in waves. Damn it all! So what? Are you telling me to pack up and go home? Is that it? I hadn't yelled at anyone. It was me talking to myself. Me telling myself something. Why was I feeling this way? And digging a hole all the way out here? What benefit would digging this hole give me? What harm would there be in not digging this hole at all? Wait, in the first place, who ordered me to dig? When I thought it over, maybe ever since grade school or even before that, my whole life had only been me doing what other people told me to. I didn't mean it was somehow constrained, living a life just based on the commands of others. And I didn't mean I was too lazy to try and find my own road in life. Metaphorically speaking, yes, it was like a road. I'd never been particularly physically fit. I didn't hit puberty very early, and if all my classmates and I got in a line, I'd usually be on the shorter end. My scores in jump rope competitions and marathons were the very picture of average. And it wasn't like the captains of the dodgeball teams would have a passionate rock, paper, scissors contest to see which would get me. During those kindergarten and grade school years, it felt like someone was only worth how fast they grew and how fit they were. Looking back on it now, it was really uncomfortable for me. The thing that turned all that around was just a few words from my mother. Keiichi, would you like to go to a cram school? You'll better grasp what you're learning in school, and it will be more fun. The very first test I took at cram school was kind of like a game. It was a lot of fun. It wasn't like the test with the same exact problem dozens of times in a row. Every question had a picture to it, almost like one of those puzzle books that came with manga magazines. If my studies at school had been like this, it would have been way more fun. Several days later, I went to the cram school again with my mother and the enrollment paperwork. Mom and the person at the cram school had a really long, heated discussion, so I accidentally dozed off and missed most of what they said, but I clearly remember one point. Mom had made a loud groan, surprised at something. By 61? Do you mean his average score was 61 points? No, not at all, Mrs. Mayabara. The deviation from the mean of all our cram schools across the country is 61. He's showing extraordinary numbers, even on a simple intelligence test. First, I would like to say that Keiichi Mayabara-kun is extremely bright. Keiichi? But he doesn't have very good grades at school. He has average marks on his report card. B's, C's, D's. Is there some kind of mistake? We cross-checked with several tests as well, and we learned some very interesting things as a result. Mayabara-kun is extremely weak when faced with questions that don't have any meaning. He just has no interest in simple, dull questions that don't have to do with everyday life. So, even if he doesn't know what 2 plus 3 is, if you told him he had 2 apples and got 3 more, he would understand that sort of question. That's right. For example, instead of telling him to draw a flattened, foldable cube, what if we asked him what a die would look like when cut open? If we did that, he could answer beautifully. Then the person from the cram school showed her a page from one of the exams I took. It was a paper with questions about construction. Construction questions were unusual, so they were really cool, weren't they? In this question, it asks to draw an unfolded isosahedron? I think that's how it's pronounced. A shape with 20 faces. When we rephrased it and asked him how he would cut out a piece of cardboard to create a 20-sided die, Keiichi-kun drew the answer as though it were easy. This is not something an average child can do. Keiichi, have you ever made a die with 20 sides from a magazine extra or anything? Dice only went from 1 to 6. I never even considered before this test that there were dice with more than 6 sides. So it was fun to imagine what kind of shape a die that went up to 20 would have. If I had a die like that, I could win at snakes and ladders against anyone. So I immediately wanted to make it. Finally, I entered cram school. There were only 4 students in the class they put me in, which was called Select. It was the highest class, and some of my classmates were in lower classes. And when I remembered how much better they had done at things like dodgeball and the 50-meter sprint, I felt happiness well up within me for the first time. Even if I wasn't as good at them physically, I triumphed over them in other ways. It was fun at first. The more I did, the more I was praised. My teachers at school suddenly started pampering me, and it felt good. My parents were satisfied too, and I enjoyed seeing them satisfied. The more I listened to my parents' commands, the more fun things got. That did happen, didn't it? I grinned dryly in self-deprecation. Because, well, my studious lifestyle didn't end up lasting very long. It was only at the beginning I enjoyed learning more and more. I gradually got along less with my friends. My classes were behind what I was learning in cram school, and I eventually stopped respecting the teachers, given that they could put me to sleep with their lectures. And, well, I was a disagreeable sort who bragged a lot about how much I knew, and the ways of the world wouldn't let me remain in that state of ecstasy forever. I would do as I was told, then I'd go above and beyond their expectations, and then they praised me. I was happy for that, and the cycle repeated itself like the wheels on a bike. I thought moving forward like that was how life worked, like a bicycle. When I moved to Hinamizawa, I realized just how inadequate it was. Some things happened, and we started saying how moving and getting a change in atmosphere would be nice. And then my father, he had a place that he liked, that he'd gone to a few times to draw the nature. He started saying that he wanted to bring his atelier there. With me in blank amazement, they decided to move to Hinamizawa. And after that, I met them, didn't I? The first day after transferring here, I went to the classroom with the teacher. I thought it would seem pitiful for her to bring me in there, so I placed my hand on the door before she could, slammed it open, and set foot into the room. Clatter. The thrilling, powerful way I opened that door was none other than my own determination to try doing my life over again. And then, within seconds, that determination took a hard counter to the face. A blackboard eraser fell on me. Plus, there was a huge rock inside. It was a supremely painful trap someone had set up. Oh, come on. Sataka was already beating me right from the first day I transferred? That frightened me. I was bewildered. The class was surprised too. I wasn't just surprised that the students in the class were all in different grades and were different genders. It was because the room felt completely different from the schools I knew. And as I spent more time with them, my surprise continued to grow. This fresh sense of surprise had never left my life, even to this day. Every day was a fresh new surprise. I've never had a single boring day since coming here. The days were lively, spent with the other club members. We played Old Maid with cards with scratches on the back to cheat. We let all our passions go wild during our games. We went all out as regular participants in tournaments at the toy store in town, and many, many more things. Recently during those times, there was the bento competition. It was then. That's when I saw an unexpected side to Satoko. Thinking back on it, I only ate dinner with her 2 nights. It was such sweet, gentle time spent, and it warmed my heart remembering it even now. I realized that Satoko was pretending to be stubborn and firm, and how brave she was, part of her art always waiting for her Nini to come home, and I vowed to become her Nini. Satoko may have been nagging and overly critical, but she knew how to take care of someone. But though it might have seemed like she was taking the lead, it was actually her way of depending upon another person. Even if Satoshi and Satoko's lives as siblings were confined by their uncle and his wife, they were still warm, sunny days. When did those sunny days all go wrong? What mistake was made? Lamenting tragedies of the past would do no good, and I told myself that so many times, but I did anyway. Keiichi, isn't that why you chose your own path? To take back that life? Nobody ordered you to do this. You decided it on your own. You don't desire anyone's praise for this. You thought it all through yourself. You'll carve it out yourself. And you'll do it now. This wasn't a path I could see very far down. Not like the road parents or society could offer. It was a narrow path, dark and utterly distressing, one for which the next step would always be shrouded in darkness. But that disheartening path would keep on going forever. It was an unlimited path, and there was nowhere I couldn't travel. The kind of path only available to those to imagine where they wanted to go. Don't be ashamed at breaking from the brightly lit paved road. In fact, feel proud that you found your very own path to walk. And I hadn't discarded the paved road either. Once I achieved my goal, I would go back to that bright road, and then I'd spend those average sunny days at my leisure. Crush. When I next realized it, the hole had grown so deep I couldn't believe it. Did I dig all this myself? I think digging this much is enough, right? I put my shovel into the bottom of the hole. I would drag the body here, throw it into the hole, and cover it up with dirt. Even if it took me time to camouflage it by putting plants on top, it would all go much more easily than digging this hole had. I glanced at my watch. It was almost evening, and I hadn't realized it. I may not have felt the time passing, but digging a hole this deep must have taken quite a lot of time. I took a seat on a slanted rock nearby and wiped the sweat from my brow. Now, once it got a little darker, I'd go get the metal bat I hid in the schoolyard. Then I'd make the call to lure him out. And then, I'd do it. The number of things I needed to do to reach that moment were dwindling. I felt that moment closing in on me much more keenly than I did the passage of time. I didn't have any hesitation, but I still felt that, a contradiction. At every step in this process, I had a few chances to hesitate, to turn back, to let myself lose my nerve. Having to endure those million temptations and wait for when the time was right was an indescribably slow and painful torture. I had thought myself acting all weak because of that, but I stopped midway through. This was okay. It was fine. I could detest the abnormal act of homicide as much as I wanted, and it didn't matter. I wasn't going to be a cutthroat killer after today. I would pass through this strange day and go back to the world I was in before. If I fell to the level of a psychopath who thought nothing of killing, I wouldn't be able to go back to my old life. So this was fine with me. I didn't have to feel ashamed at hesitating to kill, because I was human. It was so funny to me that I'd be the bearer of Oyashiro-sama's curse at the same time I was aware I was human. I exhaled lightly and stood. I concealed my presence and sharpened my senses in all directions to search for anyone around but me. Okay, let's go. One step at a time. I would walk my own path. A path no one had forced me to walk. Let's do this, Keiichi Maebara. The cicadas made an annoying fuss. Their chorus covered up the suspicious noise of me breaking twigs underfoot. And their chorus filled the path far ahead of me, letting me know I would be alone for some time. The cicadas blessed the path I walked, encouraging me with every last ounce of strength they had. The sky was far above. In not even an hour, the veil of night would draw near and the sky would be tinted with dusk. By that time, the Higurashi would let me hear their chorus in place of the cicadas. When that happened, would everything be over with? Would everything have ended? I said something along those lines when I left Satogo's fate up to a public agency. But this time was different. I would do it. I would carry it out. I would end it. It would all be over very soon. Everything would end. Yes, when the Higurashi cried. You're just trying to sound cool, Keiichi, by title dropping. Congratulations, you did it. You said the title. That was interesting. Kind of forgot basically everything about Keiichi's past, not gonna lie. So that's cool. Tips? I would imagine not. Kind of break up the action here, yeah. There was nobody at school. I couldn't hear the playful voices of children. This was the first time I'd seen the school with such a lack of human presence. Still, I quieted my breath and looked around, not wanting to be unprepared. It had gotten darker outside, but it was almost like my eyes could see more clearly now. I made absolutely sure of my safety, then walked to the heavy construction machine I'd hidden the metal bat behind. I had a tinge of worry, a premonition, that someone had found the bat and hidden it somewhere else as a prank. If that happened, would I take that as an opportunity to desist? If it really wasn't there, then... The sensation of chilled metal. It was still here where I left it. It hadn't run away. Satoshi hadn't run away. He'd waited here patiently. For me. Sorry for the wait, Satoshi. It's been a long time coming. You prepared for this? Through the metallic touch, Satoshi grins at me in my mind. That's what I should be asking, you know? I did this last year already. You should be more worried about yourself. Right on, Satoshi. Let's show him a bad time. Christ, could you have said anything worse than that, Keiichi? You could have said a better line than the fucking meme. Okay, dude. Satoshi's bat got lighter and lighter, and fit into my hands like it was being absorbed. It didn't feel wrong to swing this. I could move it around so naturally, it was like an extension of my own right arm. Of course it felt like that. Satoshi and I were holding one bat together. Next, I would make the call to lure the man out. It wasn't a bad time for it. My friends were doubtlessly parading happily through the stalls. I hadn't considered where to make the call from. My house and Satogo's were pretty far apart. If I called from my house, I wouldn't make it. Couldn't I use the school phone? But as I thought, the room was locked up and I couldn't get in. Shit. I'm so naive. Should have at least figured this part out. I couldn't call him. And just for that, was today all over? I'm sorry, Satoshi. And just as I cursed my own naivete, a miracle occurred. A bicycle came into the schoolyard. It was a familiar middle-aged man. The one from the Forest Service field office. Why? Wasn't today Sunday? Was he here to pick up something he forgot? Okay. Anyway, the forest officer went around back and felt around in his pocket, then unlocked the door and entered. The best possible coincidence, and it had to be Satoshi who saved me. The metal bat, through just my contact with it, told me this was a chance I couldn't allow to slip by. The sections for the forest office and the school were neatly separated. I felt the man head into the forest office's storehouse, which was so far in the back students weren't allowed into it. The door didn't match its fittings well, so it didn't close all the way, and the gap in the door opened slowly as if to lure me in. I took a deep breath and went in. I tiptoed along, silently and stealthily, and made it into the teacher's lounge. That was the only place with a phone. As I held my breath in the teacher's lounge, I heard the Forest Service officer walking back over. Then the back door clattered shut and was locked. I glanced out the window at the schoolyard, and watched as the man got on his bike like nothing had happened and rode out the school gate. The school once again emptied, becoming deathly silent. I waited for a bit to make sure the silence was the real deal, then reached for the telephone on the principal's desk. I fished Satogo's house's phone number out of my pocket. Yes, the number in the class directory for Satoko had been the one from their house now, where she lived with her uncle. I touched the dial with my fingers, and then thought for a moment about what to say exactly when he picked up. Despite how many times I'd gone over it in my head last night, now that I had my finger on the dial like this, it started to seep out of my mind like a cracked bucket leaking water. Simple would be best. More importantly, to say it straight and not sound suspicious. I counted off 3 heartbeats and spun the dial. That's the smoke alarm, not the phone. I don't hear screaming, the house is not burning down, someone's probably just cooking. The call sound. Would Satogo's uncle pick up? Now of all times, the hope that he wouldn't pick up, and the feeling of a doom and the knowledge that I couldn't save Satoko if he didn't, whirled around in a vortex. Hello? It was the voice of a grumpy man, like he had just woken up. He picked up. Hello? Say your name so I know you're Hojo, you asshole! It would be terrible if I got it wrong. I made up my mind. I had all the initiative on my side. Here we go. And this is the Shishibone Okinomiya police station. Am I speaking to the Hojo residents? I was changing my voice, but did he really think I sounded like an adult? Would he believe I was the police? No! Yes! This is Hojo. We currently have your daughter, Satoko Hojo, here with us. What? Satoko? What did that brat do? He fell for it. I could tell by how tense he was that he didn't doubt my words. I can explain the particulars once you have arrived here. Would you mind coming to the station right away? Right now? I already took a bath myself, so I don't really want to go out like this, though. What? You don't want to come because you already took a bath? Yes, right away. Right away? Jeez, man, what the heck did Satoko do? I'll explain once you're here. I'll be waiting. Thank you for your assistance. Ugh! 1 second! I don't know where the police station is. Where am I going? Ugh. You moron, what the hell? The Okinomiya police station? I don't know where it is either. Aren't you from around here? Why don't you know that? A greasy sweat came over my body. Eventually, just as I was about to choke, he spoke. Oh, next to the fire station, right? That's pretty far. Thank goodness. He remembered on his own for me. I didn't care where the police station was, so long as he left his house to get there. And then we will be waiting here. Oh, wait! Who am I asking for once I get there? What is your name? On top of that, he wanted to know my name? Just leave your goddamn house already. Maebashi. Excuse me. That was close. I almost thoughtlessly told him my real name. I managed to change the last syllable of it, but I put the receiver down like I was running away. My fingers were trembling, and I was soaked with a tepid sweat. I wasn't just nervous about the phone call. With that call, everything had finally been put into motion. Something smells good. Someone was definitely cooking. I left the school. It was locked before, but it was easy enough to open from the inside. But I couldn't lock it again after I left. In terms of being thorough, I wanted to lock it, but I couldn't waste time going back to the teacher's lounge and looking for the key. I needed to rush back fast as I could and ambush him. I zoomed back to the scene on my bike. If Satoko's uncle got out of town before I got there, everything would be over. He'd learned there was no one at the station named Maebashi, and things would get pretty messed up. As I returned at full speed, I passed a family wearing yukatas. They must have been on their way to the festival. Many people in Hinamizawa knew my face, though I didn't know theirs. Even just passing by them like this made me uneasy. But I didn't generally come around here, so those living in the area might not have known much about me. That didn't matter right now. I needed to get back as fast as possible, to control my breathing, and to ambush the man. I hid my bike in the thicket and picked up Satoshi's bat, which I'd just left hidden in the shade. And then I held my breath, waiting to see someone. I wondered if he still hadn't gotten here. Or maybe he went right out after the phone call and passed by here already? I couldn't figure out which it was, and was set upon by an indescribable patience. Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. Even if he came here already, he'd pass by here on the way back, right? The end result would be the same. It wouldn't change the fact that he'd die. He'd probably be coming on his motorcycle. How would I stop him then? I figured it'd be best not to think too hard and just hit him as he passed, or beat him out of his seat. The path was made of pebbles. If I hit him as hard as I could and made him lose his balance, he wouldn't be able to help falling. And then, the chorus of the Higurashi stopped. The sound of a bike approached from far away. I couldn't tell what sort of motorcycle it was from its sound, but I'd seen it parked before, so I know. It was getting rapidly closer. It was almost here. If he just went a little farther, he'd cross into that thicket and appear in front of me. I'd take a moment to make sure it was him. Then when I had, I'd put my plan into action. The motorcycle appeared. A few easily identifiable characteristics told me it was Satoko's uncle's bike, without a doubt. Was it really him? Was it really Satoko's uncle? I wasn't making a mistake, was I? I looked at its characteristics again. Its color, shape, and most of all, the man's clothes and face. Those last feelings of hesitation, I did away with them. Satoko, now, your Nini will end it, okay? Closer, closer. The bike came closer. Let's go. Satoshi! Oh, he's just straight up talking, huh? From what I remember from what you look like, I don't know, we'll just go with like a more somber version of my regular voice. Yeah. Whoosh! I jumped out of the thicket. I used my shoulder to basically tackle the uncle on the bike with all my might. He gave a dumb shout as his bike completely lost its balance. Finally, it fell, the bike scattering clouds of sand, and after spinning, it stopped. Her uncle, tossed to the ground, didn't understand what had just happened, and groaned for a few moments, crouched on the ground. Oh. Oh, that's breathing. Oops, I thought it was laughter. My breathing started to become ragged. No, I couldn't have this emotion. Some weird secretion crossed through my brain and nearly made me hallucinate. Her uncle was groaning. Now was the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What was I doing? All the sounds in the world cut off. My mental chaos from a moment ago withdrew like a lie, and I could feel the temperature in my head rapidly cooling down. The tension in my muscles all went away like the strings they'd been attached to had been cut, and I let my hands dangle at my sides. It wasn't quite like exhaustion. Have you calmed down now, Keiichi Mayabara? Do you need to remember again why things got to this point today? Scrape. Scrape. I stepped over the pebbled path, taking one step, another step, then another towards Satoko's uncle. The more I walked, the more my breathing calmed. The more I walked, the more I felt my body cooling, calming, chilling with frost. Yes. At this moment, this guy had lost permission to live. I had just rescinded it. So he mustn't stay in this world any longer. If he lived any longer, if Satoko's misfortune continued, it would be my responsibility for having allowed him to live. I could feel the cooling substance going through my whole body, even down to my capillaries. Her uncle was at my feet now, still on the ground like an idiot. I smiled coldly at how ridiculous he looked. That hurt! That's all it took for it to hurt? Satoko's heart hurt much more, and now you're gonna feel that. And with your life, I'll make up for her pain! I erased all unnecessary information from my mind. I prioritized the murder of this man. Execute, execute, execute. Wham! Oh, cool, the fucking SNES music again, cool. Utterly calmly, I delivered my first strike to the back of his head. I wanted to get at the most effective spot. At least during that first moment, I'd have to attack him while he was at his most defenseless. And if he was hit in the head, he'd cover his head. It was a defensive reaction all humans made, like machines. He used both hands to cover his head, so he couldn't pick himself up off the heap he was in on the ground. Like pounding a caterpillar into the dirt, I hit him over and over. If he covered his head, I'd hit him in the side. If he covered his body, I'd go for his head. If he rolled over, I'd strike his feet, his knees, his elbows. I didn't care where anymore. By just delivering one blow after another, I induced panic in him. I retained my overwhelming advantage, but I hadn't done nearly enough to deliver a fatal wound. Her uncle skillfully pulled himself up off the ground and started to run like a fleeing rabbit. It wasn't a judgment he'd made after seeing my face and deciding whether to fight me. Right now, he was fleeing by instinct, just trying to escape from the threat that had presented itself. A counterattack from the more physically capable uncle was what I was most concerned about. He may have run, but it wasn't all that unlucky, and the odds were in my favor. The uncle didn't run away towards people, but off the path and into the woods. How pleasant that he would run in a direction where nobody else was. He was fleeing into strange geography, like a rat that instinctively runs into tight spots over and over. Yes, he was no longer human. He was a rat. The blood vessels in my legs expanded and my total oxygen supply increased. I lowered myself to gain the most explosive velocity I could. Without breathing, I became a wind-like shadow and dashed. I crossed thickets, crushed dead tree branches underfoot, and dove through the woods like a bullet. He ran so cowardly. arms flailing as he went. After catching up to him, I didn't need so much as a blink of an eye to strike him again. My senses, mind, and body were all sharpened purely to kill this man. This was the first time I'd felt like this. Well, this was the first experience I'd ever had killing someone. It felt natural continuing to do this for the first time. And that meant I had this much talent for killing. Or perhaps the act of killing was so simple that anyone could do it. I didn't struggle or grow tired at all chasing the clumsily fleeing uncle. No matter how much he ran, it was like trying to get away from his own shadow. He couldn't get away from me. I could easily aim at his back, his shoulder, and his head even from this unnatural stance. Each time I struck him, he wailed in pain and begged pitifully for forgiveness, but it didn't disturb my mind. I was neither excited nor plagued by hesitation like before. I felt sharp. I felt like a carnivore. Of course, so did the uncle, who was trying to run away because he didn't want to die. He didn't want to be eaten, like an herbivore running with all its might, trying to get away. Despite all the attacks, despite all the hits, he kept on fleeing without even staggering. And despite the bad footing in the forest, he impressively never tripped over anything. But there was no need to admire that fact. It was simply proof that he was no more than an animal. If he was chased, he would run. If he was going to be killed, he would run. He bared his fangs at the weak, but couldn't oppose the strong whatsoever. He was lowly, vulgar, a diminutive animal. Such a puny little creature had harmed Satoko. Scar after scar to her body and mind. Deep wounds that might not ever go away as long as she lived. Ow! Oh. Ah! My cold and calm emotions suddenly turned into bestial ones. My personality changed into something specialized for murder, purely to devour the diminutive animal before me. The uncle gave a puny little shriek, covered his head, and ran. I'm impressed by how much you can run. Fine, run as much as you like. I will be your death. I will choose the moment at my leisure. Your legs will hurt, your lungs will feel about to burst, your head will hurt from lack of oxygen. If you feel the pain has become worse than death, then by all means, stop any time. Without turning back, suffocating on his terror of the approaching death, he just ran shamefully onward. Motorcycle gunman! Yeah! Welcome! He ran, but was chased, his head bashed with the metal bat, sweat and drool flying everywhere, blood clinging to him. From his mouth came the sounds of coarse, irregular breathing and high-pitched screaming that verged on crying. And pleas for forgiveness to someone, I didn't know who. Each and every second was a second of atonement that I granted him. Now, run. I don't know if I counted them right, but still. Then fall, and moan, and die. Where did you even crawl out of, anyway? You were never here before. If you were never here, you never should have showed up. If you never showed up, our lives would still be fun and enjoyable. We would have gone to today's festival, waited for each other, and gone to the shrine, laughing. We would have been playing amongst the stalls right about now. We'd be browsing the strange food stalls you only saw at festivals, trying to get prizes from goldfish scooping, ring throwing, or target practice. Mion would surely make it into a competition, and we as a club would have a grand time. And everyone would have been cheering for Rika-chan's dedication dance, and everyone would say how fun it was, and it would give us energy for days to come. Fun, enjoyable, and funny. Warm times spent with friends. And that would have happened, but it didn't. And now it was all smashed to pieces! There was no doubt that would be what the world was like if you never showed up. You were the obstacle, the mistake, the heresy in that world. But I would correct that mistake now. I would erase you and make it so this last week never happened. Tonight was the Watanagashi Festival. The holy night where taking just one life was permitted in the name of Oyashiro-sama's curse. It looked like the Higurashi stopped crying at some point. When the Higurashi cried, everything would end. and the Higurashi silenced. Lowly one. The hour of atonement is at an end. The Higurashi have stopped their crying. Thus, it is the end. The end, the end, the end. End! You don't have to run away anymore. Die with those dirty brains of yours smashed everywhere! Ah! That sound effect cut off. What the fuck? Lightning and thunder struck like an explosion. Yeah. It was so loud it shook the ground, and I smelled gunpowder. The response I got this time was clearly different from the one before. The metal bat crunched into the crown of his head, and it was like the top of his head had caved in. The bat felt like it was biting him. Motorcycle gun man. It had been the final, killing attack that visited him. When I didn't overlook the opening, he left as his knees gave out under him. I remained alert for a few moments, then thud, thud. He planted both knees in the ground, and then fell forwards, burying his head in the ground. Oh, that was fucking breathing again. I'm an idiot! I'd been holding back my ragged breathing, but now it all came out of me like a dam bursting. My head was dizzy and light and unable to maintain my balance. I leaned against a nearby tree. The uncle didn't try and guard his head any longer. After a disgusting sort of spasm, he stopped moving. Did I get him? Did I get him for sure? I fought back my exhausted urge to fall over where I stood, and drew towards him carefully, bat still at the ready. It was possible he was faking it and trying to wait it out. Should I check for a pulse? I realized right away, though, how unnecessary that would be. If I thought he might be faking it, then I would just have to keep pummeling him until I was satisfied. I fought back my ragged breathing again, and then I swung my bat far above and brought it down. Clunk. His body leaped like a bow, but he didn't try and cover his head. Then, once again, I aimed for his head and swung. His reaction was the same this time. After spending a few moments making his head into mochi, the hits gradually started to feel different, and started to spray a filthy, dark red liquid everywhere. That was enough. It was definite now. I had absolutely killed him. There was no sense of accomplishment, nor one of regret. I didn't feel anger towards Satoko's uncle, nor pity towards Satoko herself. Instead, right now, I was feeling like my heart had been stolen by the downpour. It had begun to rain at some point, and how comfortable it felt. The rainwater drenched my body and dripped down to the ground. The excitement within me faded, as the rain washed away the grime. In exchange, my shoes were so wet they made splashing sounds. And despite abusing Satoshi's bat like that, it wasn't bent very much. There were a few dents in it, probably from hitting the man, but nothing that would make it seem different from before. Instead, it had been stained, with black, with red, with mud and blood. But that itself would be evidence. The one piece of evidence needed to prove that my delusions hadn't just been daydreams, and that I'd ended Satoko's uncle for all eternity. Alright, Keiichi, calm your mind. The time for passion is over. Now is the time to be cold as ice. Ice! Yes! No, cold as ice. Ice! I needed to bury the body. But where was I? I'd simply followed the man as far as he ran into the darkness. I couldn't take a guess as to how far we'd run. It was already pitch black around us, and the only light I had to go on was the very faint lights on the road a little further down. It was so dark out. I hadn't noticed the darkness until just now. My vision was so good I could see the man's ugly hairline. Wait. Yeah, I could have counted the pores in his head. It was only now that I realized how much crazy strength I had mustered at that moment. I went over to the streetlight. I looked up and down the road, desperately trying to figure out where I was. Oh no. This was the one road connecting Hinamizawa to the town. We were unbelievably far away from Satoko's house. Had the two of us really run so far a distance? My surprise at that was accompanied by knowledge of the miraculous fact that despite running so far and making so much noise, we hadn't come across anybody at all. There was a long way between here and the ambush location where I dug the hole. There was no way I could carry the body that far. Wait, aside from that, the bike the man took here was still lying in the middle of that path. That would be an issue. The police could tell whose motorcycle it was by looking at its license plate, and they wouldn't just leave it at that. Thankfully, the corpse was in a dark forest. In terms of urgency, dealing with the bike would come first, and I wanted to get the shovel back from where I'd left it next to the hole. I shouldn't drag the body there. I would have to deal with it right here. Fortunately, the ground was like mud from the downpour, and was more sludgy here than where I was before. I might be able to dig a grave quickly here. Of course, my bicycle was still over where I'd left it too. It still wasn't over. Homicide had only been half of my goal. The other half would be just as important as the first. I would completely hide the body, not allowing a beginning to happen. I would erase the man like he never existed, and regain the peaceful times we had before. I bent my head backwards and calmed my mind even further. The big water droplets struck my brow mercilessly. They were actually quite comfortable, and for a while I let my desire have its way. After confirming that I was sharp again, I started running through the rain. The motorcycle was in the grass at the roadside. Considering how it looked, pelted with rain and covered in mud, it actually seemed like it had been lying there for a very long time. The plan was to drop the motorcycle into the swamp. The swamp was a bit of a walk from here. I lifted the bike up. I didn't think it would be so heavy. I was a little surprised. But once I had it upright, it was fairly easy to roll it along. Still, pushing this thing all the way to the swamp was really not something I wanted to do. I could no longer ignore my exhaustion, and it warned me numerous times of how far away the swamp was. This motorcycle, I wonder if I could ride it well enough. Once I got it going, it would be basically the same as a bicycle. Wouldn't it get me to the swamp quickly? A plan suggested by my exhaustion. The anxiety at getting on a motorcycle for the first time withdrew. I turned the key, and then you just kick this pedal, right? Yeah! Yeah! Vroom! It's on! And then I gripped the handlebars. First the right, then the left. Maybe I twisted them too much. The bike lurched and did a wheelie like an angry horse. I lost it for a second, but it was just a problem of how much torque to apply. Let's try that again. This time slowly, gently. That time it went well. It was strange to be on a two-wheeled vehicle that would go even if I didn't pedal. Very odd, but I got used to it quickly. Mion once told me you could get a scooter license within a day, and she was clearly right. This was pretty easy. I needed to throw the metal bat into the swamp too, but I didn't know how I would pack the bat onto the motorcycle. Without much other choice, I stuffed it into the back of my shirt, feeling like a ninja carrying a katana. If I put the tip down, the seat of my pants, and hunched over, it wouldn't fall out. I got back on the bike, and this time, got going without any difficulty. I carefully pressed the button labeled light, and a rather strong light came on, illuminating the way forward. I probably really shouldn't have turned it on, but I didn't have any way of seeing at this point, and had zero confidence I could ride through this darkness. As the rain came down on me, I maintained a precarious balance and inched my way towards the swamp. Along the way, I ran across a few people who seemed to be returning from the festival, but none of them had any interest in me. They were either all soaked through with the rain and hurrying on their ways home, or had their umbrellas low and their heads down. Yesterday I might have been wary of even these passers-by, but right now it didn't seem to be much cause for concern. In fact, it would probably be less suspicious to be riding out in the open like this instead of sneaking around. More and more, though, I started to think of that idea as naive, brought on by my exhausted state. I climbed a steep hill. On a bike, the hill would have put me out of breath, but I just had to accelerate a little bit to climb the entire thing. Motorcycles sure are convenient. For a moment, its lights illuminated a sign before I passed by it. Onigafuchi Swamp. Good children do not play around here. Still, it wasn't like the way to the swamp was cordoned off by a metal fence or anything. Parents and teachers would get mad at you if they found out you were playing at the swamp, but some of the bad kids in my class apparently snuck out here sometimes to see the giant crayfish in the place. They talked before about how they'd go to the candy shop and buy some pickled squid, then just tie it to a fishing line and throw it, and all the crayfish would come running. Once I got up to the bank, There was a tiny ritual shrine and traditional ropes on one of the trees. And, as it swallowed the downpour whole, the blackened swamp had waited for me. If I slammed on the accelerator from the cliff-like stop I was on now, the thing would fly straight into the middle of the swamp. I had to be careful not to fall in with it. If I drowned and disappeared, man, what a stupid ghost story that would be. On the night of Watanagashi, Satsuko's uncle's corpse was found in a thicket by the road leading to town, and Keiichi went missing. Oh, okay. People would whisper that I'd been demoned away. The 5th year's curse would be a half-baked one. I got off the bike and twisted the accelerator as hard as I could. I let go just when it seemed like it would drag me forward. The bike shot off the cliff and was swallowed down into the swamp, leaving a far fainter splash than I'd imagined. Its surface was being pummeled by the downpour, and the muddy, filthy water was flowing into it. I couldn't even make out the motorbike I'd just thrown in there. It was pretty heavy after all. It would be quickly engulfed by the soft mud at the bottom of the swamp, and it would be pulled deeper and deeper until it reached hell itself. I felt no reluctance whatsoever in throwing the man's motorbike down to the land of the demons, but I did have a tinge of regret about Satoshi's bat. I lost the bat with muddy water, and the gore sticking to it came off easily. I had sort of shared today's events with Satoshi, so I just wanted to give it a quiet place to stay. That's how I felt. I started to feel more like returning it to the locker from before, so it could continue to keep watch over Satoko. Satoshi, I probably, misunderstood you. Satoshi listened quietly, without nodding. I am absolutely convinced now. You were the one who beat your aunt to death last year and saved Satoko. I always scorned you and called you a coward who ran away, but I was wrong. To the rest of the world, some deviant was behind that incident, but I know. That was something you did for her. And then, you disappeared. You finally got back that piece and lost it within days. So, I swear to you that I will live life to the fullest from now on. Live it enough for the both of us. I will live on as though this week, this day, never happened. But I will never forget this short time we shared together for as long as I live. I didn't know what expression Satoshi made as he listened, but as someone who had protected the same girl, I felt he had smiled and given me his blessing. And then, my hand moved of its own accord, and the bat I had hesitated to throw away left my hands and flew through the air. It traveled its parabolic path, spinning all the while, and the swamp absorbed it without a sound. There weren't even any ripples when it hit the surface. The surface was tempestuous because of the downpour, and the bat was long gone. For a moment, I regretted having thrown it, but I realized that might have been what Satoshi had wanted. You're right. I still can't let myself give in to emotion just yet. I would return for my shovel, get on my bike, dig a hole to hide the body, and bury it. It seemed like a simple sequence of events, but I felt extremely exhausted, and I had to do it all tonight. Satoshi left me with only the advice that I needed to finish this up soon, then fell silent for eternity, and disappeared at the bottom of the demon's abyss. I returned to the path I had ambushed her uncle on. My bike was hidden, sweeping in the brush. I stood it back up. My whole body felt heavy, but I needed to finish by the end of the day, even if I had to whip myself to do it. Oh, I forgot something. I didn't just come here for my bike. The shovel was here too. Not good, I was zoning out. Every once in a while, if I let my guard down, my vision would almost go black. Pull yourself together, Keiichi Maebara. It's still not over. I went into the grove of trees and looked for the hole in which I'd hidden the shovel. Unfortunately, I had hidden it deep in the forest, not wanting it to be seen, and now everything was black in the night and I couldn't see anything anymore. I reawakened my fading consciousness and realized just how big this annoyance really was. Wait, you can't be serious. The sweat the rain washed away before came back up to my skin. Deep, deep in the forest, where the streetlights could never reach. The fact that it would be so pitch black had been completely uncalculated. With this much darkness, even if I had been able to kill him right away like I'd planned, I don't know if I still could have buried him without a problem. What should I do? I simply couldn't find a shovel tonight. If I forced myself to go deep into the forest, I'd lose even my sense of direction and might actually get lost in there. That might have been an exaggeration, but it was fully possible I'd trip over a tree root and sprain a muscle. Oh, right, my house's storage room. There was another shovel there, the same fold-up kind. Couldn't I go back to the house, get the shovel, and give up on finding the shovel tonight? It's not as though the name Mayabara is written on the shovel, but it seemed like an unusual item from an import variety store made in another country, so I didn't want to leave that shovel here. But in this darkness, I couldn't do anything. I should give up and go back to the storage room. And there was an electric lantern in there. If I used that for light, I could look for it. But it was so extremely dark. Could I light the way with just the lantern? The light of a lantern in this dark night. I couldn't discard the possibility of it drawing eyes. And I doubted if I could find the shovel with the lantern's feeble light. Besides, I'd left the body there for a pretty long time already. My sense of fear, dulled through excessive exhaustion, finally reared its ugly head. Anyway, for now, the most important thing was to hide the body. A shovel being found wouldn't be a big deal, but a corpse? If they found that, I'd share the same fate as Satoshi. First, I'd go back to the storage room at home. Then I'd get the lantern. Now that it's gotten this dark, I might still need light to dig a hole for the body too. And I'd get the other shovel. And then I'd deal with the body first thing. Once that was done, I'd come back here, find the shovel, and bring it back. I had to do at least that much. But I was so tired. But complaining was getting me nowhere. If I started getting complacent now, everything will have been for naught. At some point, I had sat down. I gritted my teeth and endured, lifting my heavy hips. The night was young. Of all the nights I'd experienced, none had ever been this long. When would it all end? The night was young. Damn. That was a good fucking part. And it seems like this little segment's not over yet, but this episode sure is. God damn, I don't want to stop here, but I feel like I kind of have to, because I got other stuff to do, man. Like, Jesus Christ. Especially considering, like, it's almost 6 p.m. where I am, so, yeah. That's gonna be it for this episode then, guys. If you liked it, then be sure to press the like button, and if you didn't like it, then fuck you too. Remember to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on all my videos and stuff. And as always, my name is Godzi, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye!